If you're heading to Costa Rica and want to escape the massive tourist resorts of the Pacific side, you need to head east. The Caribbean coast around Cahuita and Manzanillo is wilder, more remote, and absolutely bursting with wildlife. We based ourselves in Punta Uva to see if the Caribbean side really lives up to the hype. I'm Libby, and this is the Ocean to Jungle Guide to Punta Uva. Punta Uva is tucked right down the bottom of the Caribbean coast, just a few kilometres from the Panamanian border. The drive here is an adventure in itself, passing through dense rainforest before the road eventually hugs the coastline. We stayed at a place called Casa Viva, which cost around £140 a night. It was essentially a little studio apartment dropped right in the heart of the jungle, and waking up to the terrifying roar of Howler Monkeys and having Great Green Macaws and toucans in the trees above your roof makes it worth every penny. Our studio was literally a 2-minute walk down a private path to the coastline, and Casa Viva actually has its own private stretch of beach, which is incredibly rare for Punta Uva. When we arrived, there was a massive storm out at sea, so the swell was huge and a bit intimidating, but it gave the coast this brilliant raw energy. We also gained a new roommate. This is a Central American agouti, and he came to the studio every day looking for scraps, so we threw a few melon pieces in the trees for him. The next day we walked down to Punta Uva beach towards Manzanillo. It was stunning and totally empty at first, and we had an amazing encounter with some howler monkeys right above us. As we kept walking, we spotted whimbrels, plovers, little blue herons and sandpipers. And since it was a Saturday, the beach eventually did fill up with locals, having barbecues and playing music, which gave it a brilliant, authentic Caribbean atmosphere. We also caught a glimpse of our first Great Green Macaw, the iconic endangered bird of this specific region, but more on them later. The next day we hit Cahuita National Park, and my pro DIY travel tip is do not walk there and back. We parked our car at the main Cahuita town entrance and then grabbed a taxi down to the Puerto Vargas entrance. This lets you walk the 12 to 15 kilometre one way right through the park, ending back at your car. The Puerto Vargas side starts with this amazing raised boardwalk through the swampy jungle. Because we knew we had a 15-kilometre hike ahead of us in high humidity, I actually left my heavy spotter scope at the lodge, which I instantly regretted when we saw loads of birds, but we knew that we'd come back for it eventually. As we reach the end of the trail, the jungle completely opens up to the Caribbean Sea. It is rugged, raw, and absolutely stunning. We saw Coatis, royal terns, and magnificent frigate birds cruising the thermals above the water. As we walked the coastal trail, the mammal sightings were also non-stop. We had white-faced Capuchin monkeys, raccoons, more coatis, and red-tailed squirrels. The only disappointment was that we didn't spot a single eyelash pit viper, which are supposedly famous in Cahuita because they often come in a bright yellow morph, which they use to camouflage perfectly against yellow fruits and flowers. I was desperate to see one, but we had no luck this time. And then the ultimate irony, after walking 15 kilometres through pristine, protected jungle, scanning every single branch, we arrived back at the tarmacked car park to see a sloth just hanging above our cars. Back in Punta Uva, let's talk about food. This region is quite expensive, but we found a favourite spot called Sol de Caribe, where the vegan food was great. Although we were slightly distracted the first time we visited here by the sight of a two-toed sloth and her baby navigating the power lines right above the restaurant. We also loved a little hummus and pita spot, and if you're on a budget, make sure you hit up the Super Negro supermarket as they stock Rios vegan food. The next morning we'd booked a snorkel tour out on the Cahuita reef. Because of the storms from the previous days, the visibility was pretty poor early on, although it did clear up a bit later. Still, we managed to see quite a lot, including loads of different corals, some brilliant juvenile damselfish, lobsters, and a couple of nurse sharks. But honestly, compared to Belize or other areas that we visited around the Caribbean, it was a bit of a letdown, but just because the water was so murky. So I definitely recommend coming here on a day that was clear. Cahuita is actually totally unique in Costa Rica, as it was established in the 1970s specifically to protect the coral reef here. But today it is the only national park in the country that is co-managed by the local community rather than just the government. It's a brilliant conservation model. Since we didn't bring the spotoscope the first time, after the snorkelling we planned to drive straight back towards the Puerto Vargas boardwalk. Why do Cahuita twice? Well, we planned to hike to Manzanillo, but the storms had turned those trails into an absolute mud bath. Cahuita's boardwalk is raised, meaning you can still get deep into the jungle without slipping everywhere. Having the scope this time completely changed the game, and we got incredibly close views of Howler Monkeys in the trees. And even though Howler Monkeys sound like terrifying jungle monsters, they are incredibly docile leaf eaters, and they use these massive roars to mark their territory from miles away so that they don't have to physically fight other troops. We also saw a lot of tree creepers like this one, absolutely battering an insect against a tree, and some white-faced Capuchin monkeys. But the highlight was seeing a white-collared Manakin lek site in full glory this time, not with one single lone male like we saw in Garumo Lodge, but actually with potentially up to about 15 at one point I saw lekking in the same spot. It's really difficult to get footage of them because they move so fast when they're lekking, and I ended up resorting to just using my phone. Our second to last day, like most days here in Costa Rica thanks to the continual jet lag, started very early, and we found baby hummingbirds being fed, crested guans, and finally we got clear footage of the Great Green Macaws. Casa Viva is surrounded by almond trees, which these macaws are completely dependent on for both food and nesting. They usually feed right in the top of the canopy, so seeing them clearly can be tricky. But when the light hits them, you can see that they aren't just green. They are literally a rainbow of blue, red, and yellow. They are severely endangered, so having them as basically our daily alarm clock was an absolute privilege. We spent the rest of the day just chilling on the beach, accompanied by Lola, the lodge dog, who decided to adopt us for the afternoon. And on our final morning, Dave finally got the drone out, and this was the only time that he flew it in Costa Rica actually, because the country is so fantastic at protecting its land. Almost everywhere you go is a national park or a protected reserve, which means a strict no drone rule to protect the wildlife. Casa Viva just happened to sit in a tiny legal pocket outside, giving us this incredible view of the coast. I squeezed in one last birding session before we left and found a long-billed hermit and then the jackpot, a mixed flock of Trogons. We had gartered violaceous and slatty-tailed Trogons all calling together. And then suddenly a common black hawk landed right in the middle of the trees, instantly scaring the entire Trogon flock away. A dramatic end to the morning, but fantastic footage of this hawk. We absolutely loved the Caribbean coast, and despite the storms ruining our Manzanillo plans and the murky snorkelling, the sheer volume of wildlife at Casa Viva and Cahuita made it one of our favourite stops. Join us in the next video as we head to Turrialba. And don't forget to check out my blog, oceantojungle.com.